Thank you. I think we've had some very, very good points raised by the rest of the speakers so far. The key words that have come out for me, I've made some notes the other day: technology, sustainability, the uniqueness of Jersey. I think these are all messages that I'm probably going to echo a little bit. Resilience and change. So, I mean, that's really good. I mean, you've heard a lot from the speakers so far. You've heard about them, their route here. But I think the first thing I want to do is actually know a bit more about you as an audience. So, everybody, can you please stand up on your feet? I know you don't like it. We'll be over in a minute, but I've seen a few yawns and tirednesses in the room, so let's stand up. Right, what I want to do is I want to understand who am I talking to, okay? And I'm sure some of the other speakers do as well. So if you're involved in the finance sector in any way, please sit down. Okay, 3, 4 of you there, brilliant. Utility sector, obviously we've heard from a water and electric. You guys please take a seat. Yeah, okay. So the services to agriculture, I'm talking, everything from agronomy, selling machinery, spare parts. Who's in the room? Who fits into that bill? Maybe sit down. Okay, this is good. We're going in the right way here. Environment and government. I think that we've had some speakers here from the government. If you're involved with the government, please take a seat. Good. This is really, really good. There's looking like there's lots of farmers in the room. So anybody involved who's here today who is not actually involved directly with farming, who's just come basically for the nice lunch. Good. So all being well, whoever's still standing should be in one way or another directly involved with agriculture. And that's ultimately what this conference is about. Okay. So you are the people, so you can all sit down now. So thank you very much. So I now know who I'm talking into the room. I want to talk to you about some of the challenges that I see, but I also maybe want you to shout out and tell me if you agree or disagree. So first of all, that is me. I want to sort of quickly talk to you about my journey here, and I don't literally mean getting on the plane yesterday. I'm how I became to standing here. I mean, I'm not necessarily from a farming background. You've got to go back to my great-grandfather to actually get to the point where we owned any land and farmed it. But I always knew I wanted to be involved in agriculture, engineering in one way or another, but I wanted to almost be a salesman to begin with who actually knew what he was talking about. So I went off to Harper, I studied engineering, and from that, I was fortunate enough to meet a lot of people, but as part of that, I worked for Standard for 5 months on a placement. And what that does is that opened my eyes to talking to growers, understanding a lot, and that really cemented my route to coming into what I'm doing. So I've gone through a sales and different route. I spent some time working for Briggs Irrigation. So I'd come through from a very much a practical point of view, hands-on service, being a technician, and then that led me to GRIMME. And I think that's really how I want to talk a little bit about GRIMME for those in the room who don't know what we do as a business, and I'll quickly gloss through that, and then I want to go on and talk a little bit about some of the technology that's coming, not just through us, but globally. Some of the things that may benefit you as an island, and because we all know that through dinner last night, talks today, it's we've all got the same challenges. It's not just here, it's globally, labour, all these things. So, that is GRIMME. Okay, GRIMME is still a family business. We're 160 years old, started off as a blacksmith in a small workshop, and now it's a multinational company. There is still the GRIMME family. So if you look in that top corner there, you've got Franz GRIMME Jr. He took over the business in the very early 80s, and his wife Christine, and then his boys. You've got Philip on the left and Christoph on the right. They've not just been handed the business; they've actually had to work for it. So Philip went off and worked for Agco for 3 or 4 years in South Africa before being allowed to come back to the family business. And Christoph on the right, he worked for Klaas. So they've learned business from other people. They've seen and traveled the world. And what I'm trying to sort of show with that graphic there of the world is GRIMME is not a German business in the truest sense. It is a German business in ownership, but we operate in 120 countries worldwide. We speak 32 languages. There's 2,700 employees. So what I've said to a couple of people today is the whole ethos of GRIMME is getting closer to the customer, actually listening what the market wants and trying to react to that. And we can't always react to it all the time, but that's what we want. And then on the right-hand side there, that's just a few of GRIMME's other companies, something you might not necessarily know about, but we've heard the words vertically integrated, Dave, from one of the other speakers. Well, vertically integrated for GRIMME means actually owning the companies that makes our components. So these bottom two actually make the components that go into our machine. That allows us to control quality. That allows us to deliver on time, most of the time, Eric. And these two here, Azlift and Spudlick, are more around the machinery, Infield. And then the top much meter one, that's probably not one anyone's really heard of, but that's looking to the future. That's looking at what technology is out there that can benefit agriculture in the future. Robotics, vision systems, that's 10, 15-year vision, but all that stuff gets fed back into the main business. So I've used this image a few times in a couple of talks, but I think this sort of shows the evolution of agriculture, and what I'll show you in a second is sort of where I feel it's going. I mean, if you take the evolution of man image on the far side there, if you apply that to agriculture, I would say that's when we went from hunter-gatherers. We then turned into growing a few cereal crops. Then it was we put hedges up to keep livestock in, and then industrial revolution, all these things. So that's that. But I would say that tractor and planter image, that's more about sort of modern day agriculture. That's trying to symbolize what modern day agriculture is, and when there was drivers for output, efficiency, profit, but maybe we've lost some of the things. We've heard the words regenerative agriculture today and sustainability, and I think actually maybe what this modern agriculture has lost is some of the good practices that we had on the far side there. And what we've got here with the robots, that's trying to just symbolize that maybe is the future. Sensing technology, imagery, helping us make decisions, smart decisions, removing labor, being more efficient. So that's sort of trying to visualize, but that's another way of putting it. I stole this from someone else's presentation once, but this is everyone's saying at the moment we're in the fourth agricultural revolution. Well, what the hell does that mean? Because I didn't realize we'd had the first or second. But that's when the adoption of modern agriculture. I would say that would be the late 18th century, early 19th century, people understanding the importance of rotations and livestock and cereal and all these things. And then we come to point two, post-World War I. Why was there a change, a revolution at that point? Probably the same reasons as everyone's looking to technology now. It's labor. There was many million people globally had died. The workforce had disappeared. The UK had lost so many horses during World War I. There was nothing to pull the plough, so there was a demand, a push, a drive for change. And then moving on to the Green Revolution, that's the one that people sometimes forget, but that's where there was again another driver because science was leading the way. We understood DNA, gene editing. We could change and manipulate things. So that were giving us the new tool, which I think leads into the digital revolution. And I would say we're at the start of that because there's digital revolution in the sense of guidance systems. Tractors driving a straight line, yeah, great. But it's the sensing technology, it's the decision making, that's the future where it's coming, where all of this intelligence and processing ability was in the hands of the military and NASA and all these people. But actually now technology is becoming cheaper. It's now going to be at the point where it's going to be on agricultural machines. It's on the cars you drive already. So it's going to happen. It's going to come. So when we sort of took up about the dawn of change, we've spoken a little bit of robotics and automation. I've just got a few little photos here of machines from around the world. But what we're going to look at, we'll come back to the red one and speak about that more in detail. But as we're looking at some of these, what do we notice? These are ultimately tool carriers. They're just replacing a man. They're following an A-B line, or a woman, an A-B line doing a simple process. But as we move around, from agro and tele, I've actually seen this robotic machine working. It's a tool carrier at the end of the day. It does a job. It's fine. But as we move across to the small robot company and farm-wise, that's when the intelligent system's coming in. Products like that are making a decision on the fly. They're identifying, is that a weed? Is that, it's making a yes-no decision. But that's a little bit of where technology is going at the moment. And then I want to talk about the middle one. So when I mentioned earlier Schmiede one of the GRIMME companies, that was just a little prototype that they put together. And what that's doing is that was looking at automation. That was looking at can we use a vision system to drive that machine? So actually I don't need the driver. The driver can now maybe work on the machine. But we still have labor. So that's maybe a direction in the automation, but it's not solving the problem completely. So just for the benefits of everyone, there's a very, very short video of that machine working. So what we've got on here is a vision system that will do all the steering, and it's also looking at what soil is flowing up the machine as well. So all that's doing really is just taking the tractor driver out. That's not really doing anything. That's maybe an indication of what the future could look like. But I say there's other technology that's maybe out there that could possibly benefit by working in conjunction. So Tomra, for example, just one of the many, many products that are available, a camera sorting system. I think there's a Tomra 5A, I think, working here in a pack house. What that's doing is that's actually taking that packing and sorting some of those elements and reducing the labor there. Isn't the next step to really go one step further from what we've just seen is, I'll quickly show a video of that for those who aren't familiar, but it's just a camera sorting system, and I apologize for the quality of the video. Tomra wouldn't, for some reason, provide me with a high quality image. But what that's doing is that's taking a dirty sort of feedstock, X-field, soil clod, horn, and through a series of, as a vision system, it's cameras, light, it can identify what is not a potato and reject it. And work rates are pretty quick, but I think the next clever step is say, how can we take that and put it on a harvester, and also let's have that harvester semi-automated, because that would be good, yeah? That's possibly the way we go, and that is the way things are going, but I'm going to tell you now, it's not happening in the next 5 years. We're a little way off that, and that's not through not wanting to do it. I would say it's through the challenges of vision systems working in dusty, dirty, variable light conditions. There's some real challenges there. So yeah, the point I was sort of trying to make really was, we need something like that system in that, and it will come in time, and the driver there is definitely labor, but the way I see technology possibly going is in the infield scenario is you've got one person who manages 2 or 3 of those machines working on a small scale on the field, so you're controlling quality, you're controlling output, speed. So this is about as far as we have got as a business in putting those camera sorting systems into machinery. It's in a grader. You can move that grader, yes, but that's about as far as we've got. I would like to say in the next 5 to 8 years we're going to push that into in-field equipment. That's what I want to see. So yeah, I can't really tell you anything exciting and revolutionary. I'd love to come here and present something saying this is what's coming out next, Agritechnica, watch this space, because I can't. But what I probably want to talk about is identifying some of the other technology that might be worth considering. I mean, thankfully we've had a science lesson today and talking about methane. But I want to talk to you about AD plants. I apologise for the bad graphic there, but we all know within principle how an AD plant works. You've got a feedstock, manure, food waste, potato waste maybe in the case of Jersey. And what do we get from that? We get the methane, which we then generate electricity from, and a liquid that we go and spread on the land as a pretty rudimentary, crude fertilizer. But there's one other thing that we get from those AD plants, that byproduct, that sludge, that cake, that waste. What can we do with it? Well, there's a project and a company that's been backed actually by Prince Charles and the Prince's Trust and a number of Innovate UK funded projects. And it's called CCM Technologies. And what CCM Technologies are doing is they've worked out a process to be able to take carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, but also from somewhere else, a process within a factory. So just going back to, rudimentary GCSE level, chemistry and science, we've said already we get methane coming from the AD plant, but what happens when you burn something in an exothermic reaction? You get a fuel, you get oxygen, a bit of a heat and spark, and what do you get from it? You get carbon dioxide and water and heat. So let's consider utilising that byproduct of your electricity generation to maybe supplement what's coming in from nuclear and other sources, but let's lock that CO2 in. But how are we locking it in? What's actually happening there? It's actually being processed in such a way that it can make a fertilizer. That fertilizer is much like an animal feed, pelletized, quite crude, but it gives you about 85% of the nutrition that your soil and land actually needs to grow, again, another crop of potatoes or something else. And that can be applied in furrow with machines. So what we're getting at is you can make use of some of your byproducts, again, for not just energy, but also as a fertilizer to put in the back in land. So almost that's becoming, some may argue, carbon negative, who knows. And this isn't just a few crazy boffins doing this. There's some really big backers behind it. And Walker's Crisp are installing a site at their factory in Leicester, and that's going in over Christmas. Branston Potatoes, who are the sole supplier of potatoes in England and Scotland to Tesco, they've got a site going in, and Viridor, the waste management company. So there is some seriously big players who are considering this, but this is for the potato guys, this is where their benefit is here. in actually getting a fertilizer that can go back into the soil and making that full, complete cycle. See, that's probably where I want to go on the technology side of things, but I want to maybe try and make everyone think a little bit about benchmarking, where we stand, because Jersey is unique. It's absolutely unique, but where's your product going? What are you competing against? So I've just taken this is the UK. There is 117,500 hectares of potatoes grown in the UK. But what I want to focus on is, these are all the elements. Don't worry too much. I want to just focus on this 26% here. Okay, what is this 26%? This 26% is the total cost of machinery and equipment in a typical British farming system that grows potatoes. That seems a lot, but where's that actually 26% coming from? Of that 26%, you break that down, 44% depreciation, 21% spares, and 21% fuel. So, it's okay. So that's fine. If we put depreciation as reinvestment in your equipment and your machinery, not just actual financial depreciation, and then you look at spares, that's quite high. And obviously, but that's including all processes within that operation. That includes the forklift that moves the boxes around. That includes the tractor. So when we actually maybe focus that onto where those costs are, I mean, just as an overview, I've purposely not covered it yet, but that typically is the cost to produce 1 hectare of potatoes all in the UK. I mean, I don't know where that compares to Jersey. Does anyone want to be brave enough and put a figure on that? Because bear in mind, 40% of this audience are potato growers. No, feel free to come and talk to me at the end about that one. So depreciation incredibly high, spares and repairs, but like we've said, that's actually all machinery in the operation. So let's maybe just focus that just on the potato equipment. And I made a couple of assumptions here, but I've gone and said of all of that, actually maybe the potato equipment in your makes up maybe 60% of depreciation. We can adjust that figure. And the spares and repairs, well, it's all soil engaging. It's going to wear out quicker than the tractor maybe. So I've just put some figures there. So maybe £490 per hectare is depreciation reinvestment in machinery in a typical UK business. And this isn't the top businesses. This data has come from a benchmarking survey done by the AHDB, and the top guys, the top 25% who are making the most money, are actually spending a lot more on depreciation than that. So I've just taken the middle 50% here. And the spares and repairs. So what you find is the top people who make the most money are spending the most on machinery, but also spending the least on spare parts and repairs. So I want to compare that to Jersey. I've only been here for 24 hours or so, but I've learned a lot while I've been here. But let's look at Jersey. You're 11,600 hectares. But you're unique in the sense that half of your total land mass is actually dedicated to agriculture in one way or another. And of that, you've got 2,700 hectares is just on the potato side of things. So I don't think there's any other place in the whole entire world where 23.2% of the land mass is dedicated to one crop. So that, you are unique in what you're doing here. I'm just focusing a little bit on the GRIMME side of things because that's my background, and Eric Grube has been brilliant in giving me some figures on equipment here. But I just want to sort of translate that and try and do almost a benchmarking study based on what we've just seen on the UK. I'm not saying these numbers are going to be accurate, but so this is just roughly what we've got here. We've got one full grading line, 16 planters, 52 harvesters. There's 69 GRIMME machines in and around the island. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Keep buying them. But what does that actually equate to when you look at your spend? So I've gone away and looked at the 4-year spend on spare parts that have arrived here and the 4-year spend on machinery. And what are we actually noticing? Does anyone, bear in mind we were in, for an average UK was 490 there and 200 and something there. Does anyone want to? Go on, someone, just say a number. Humour me. At least double. On parts or machinery? You'll be surprised. You're only 14% of the UK average spend on new machinery. Right, so that's, okay, so we've got a lot of machines in a modest sized landmass, so logic tells us from there that, okay, well those machines aren't wearing out. Logic says that maybe, so that's, or you're depreciating them a long time. So let's look at the parts then. You're within about £2 of what the UK is, so that's telling me is there's a low level of reinvestment in equipment and a high level spend on spare parts. What I'm suggesting going forward, and yes, I work for GRIMME, but no, I'm not a salesman anymore, is actually let's look at shifting some of that money into there, but do it with a step change. Don't do it for the sake of it. Don't replace that SE75 with another one for the sake of it. Use some of that technology that we've just spoken about to where it makes a real difference, where you can get those, and a number of you have spoken to me today about, and I've used the John Deere analogy of John Deere. Every time they need to bring a new product to market, it has to meet a target of making a 10% saving, whether that's cost of production, fuel saving, whatever. So really all I'm trying to get at is your cost of parts are horrendously high for what you're actually doing with machines, right? Look at spending that, but spend it clever. Don't spend it for the sake of it. And that's just to visualize your and also the trend as well, the 4-year trend. I actually had to go back 4 years for some of that data because 1 year there was no spend on machines. So your trend is down on machinery, but your trend is actually curving upwards on spare parts. So that's telling me that your running of machines is getting to the pretty expensive. We've talked a lot as speakers today about what's good about Jersey, but I use a real basic SWOT analysis all the time when I do a lot of consultancy work with customers, where we actually think about what do you do well. And I think we've heard so many good things about Jersey and so many strengths of what you're doing here. The provenance of your product, the brand, the uniqueness, that reputation. You've got that climate, the first ones to market, that taste. We've spoken about all these things. We spoke about over dinner as well. That differentiation. That's brilliant, but what we've always got to do in the back of our mind is say, well, what do we not do as well? And I don't think, and shout out to me if you think I'm saying anything wrong here, but I would say, some of your weaknesses are your distance to market. And I don't necessarily mean, it's the challenges of getting to market, i.e. the transport costs. I think there's some inefficiencies in wastage, which is difficult to control, I appreciate. You've got the short rotations, you're a very limited growing area. You can't do much with what you've got, in the sense you can't suddenly go and find new land or rent it elsewhere because it physically doesn't exist. You're working with a single variety, so you've got all the challenges of that. I've heard a lot about the dependency on labour, and I put machinery market in there because I've asked this question of 3 people since I've been here. Well, what happens to your machine when it gets to 18, 20 years old? Well, just sits in the hedge, or it gets cut up for scrap. It gets to the point, well, there is no used machinery market, and I think that's something where we can help as GRIMME, is to look at that and maybe helping keep that sort of fleet of machinery younger. By doing that, is we can find homes for equipment machines when it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, but we can't help you when it's 20 years old because nobody's wanting it at that point. What are your opportunities? I think that's really that really comes to the future. That is, what can you do to develop, new markets? Mr. Richardson over there, we spoke over dinner last night, and we were talking a lot about new markets and differentiation. Jersey Royal 2.0, I think that pretty comes in a bit with your comments, really, Nick, about cannabis. I had initially thought of another unique variety, but I think where you're a different crop could come in there. We've spoken a bit, I've just spoken about the anaerobic digesters and how maybe that could utilise another waste product and actually turn it into something that benefits you, i.e. fertilizer or energy. The automation and robotics, I think that comes with saving the labour, and I think that's a real push factor for you. I think you're going to have to do it rather than necessarily want to do it. And benchmarking, it's always good to look over the hedge and see what someone else is doing, not just on your island, but also globally. Go and see what people are doing in other parts of the world. I think it's really, really valuable to do that. And there's other markets in the world where you can learn some lessons from going to the US or India, particularly India. Smaller scale farming, but warm climate, fast growing seasons, early emergence. There's a lot can be learned from seeing some of the systems there and bringing something away. And threats, that's what we've all got to try and avoid. We've heard about water today and climate change. as the climate warms, your main competition is Suffolk, Cornwall. You know, those guys are now only maybe 2 weeks behind you in growing season, so it's maintaining that competitive advantage, and not just relying on your strengths all the time. Build on your strengths, but don't just rely on your strengths. And we've also got changing tastes. That's the thing, you know, we've heard a lot about pasta consumption, rice. I mean, I think the consumer now starts to understand more that rice is not the be-all and end-all. But these are the threats to your business, and don't bury your head in the sand and just focus on the strengths. Work on all the other things as well. So, you know, I've tried to keep it pretty brief. I probably rushed through because I didn't want to go over the same ground as some of the other speakers. But when we're looking at the threats, yeah, that's the bit I'm going to say. If I can emphasize anything, is try and turn those threats and those weaknesses into, you know, strengths and opportunities. So in summary, what I want to try to say is look for the opportunities that are out there, whether that's new markets, building on that premium product that you've got. Working to your strength is always important, but don't be afraid to reinvest, but reinvest in the right ways. Don't just change for change's sake. Be clever and grow smarter. I think you can interpret that in many, many different ways, but you use the skills you've got, the knowledge you've got, the abilities, and try and do it more efficiently, without that wastage. You know, consider all those elements of your growing and where the gains can come from. And that point I made about India and China, you know, seeing the world, there's a lot to be said for traveling and, you know, get out there and see the world, because some of those lessons that you can see from Southeast Asia might benefit your markets, not just on the marketing side, but the growing, the crop husbandry. There's a lot of things out there. So really, I mean, I've kept that pretty short, but I just want to say thank you very much. And, you know, if anyone has got any questions or want to discuss anything, particularly cost of productions at the end, I'm more than happy to discuss it.